Creating from the Heart, the Artistry of Living. I'm Suzy Vance, and I'm here with Evelyn Hernandez. Evelyn!
Thank you, Suzy, for inviting me.
I am thrilled to have you, especially to learn about your project. But first, let me ask you, how did you get into doing what you're doing today? I mean, you are busy to begin with, before you ever got into this project.
Yeah.
What do you do to earn a living?
I am a healthcare director for Genentec, which is a biotech pharma company. And my area for work is Chicago and Northwest Indiana. And so my job is to collaborate with some colleagues that work in my company, as well as calling on the big, large institutions like Northwestern, Advocate Aurora, Rush, and meet with the C-suite pharmacy and physician groups to ensure that we can provide them the Genentec medications to treat cancer, blindness, MS. And so that's what I do for a living.
Okay.
In healthcare.
And gloriously, you ended up covering Illinois and Indiana, so you found out what Indiana was all about.
Actually, I found out about Indiana back in 2008 when my sister bought her house in Beverly Shores.
Oh, my God.
And I would come every weekend to visit her here in the
And now you live here.
Now, since then, I've bought a house, and I'm a resident in Beverly Shores. That's how much I like it.
I love it. Okay. And how did you get into exactly what you're doing as a volunteer these days? What is it that's happening?
So in 2012, I was visiting my sister, and at that time, my boyfriend was visiting from New York, and him and I had just moved back to Illinois and to Indiana area when I was living in New York, and we spent a week at my sister's house. And we went to the beach, and unfortunately, we both got caught in a rip current, and that was in June of 2012, and he drowned that day. And so since then, I've become a water safety advocate. And part of what I do is I bring together families of drowning victims, as well as families and friends, communities that care about drowning, and to talk about water safety best practices, and how can we unite communities on a similar language so that we can preserve life. And so...
so you don't have to have the drownings.
So that we can prevent or reduce the drownings, right? Because drowning is preventable. And unfortunately, we've had 57 drownings in the state of Indiana.
State of Indiana?
Since 2010, 57.
Have most of those been in Lake Michigan? Because Lake Michigan's just this little piece. Yeah,
so actually 57 drownings in the state of Indiana in Lake Michigan in our public beaches have been since 57. That doesn't even count drownings on boating accidents, does not count drownings for lakes that might be in more
little teeny lakes, correct, other places?
Count. Just only Lake Michigan.
Yes. 57.
Yeah, we... So I work with the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, or when I say I work is I volunteer, and I support the organization. It's a small nonprofit that's been tracking drownings in the entire Great Lakes. So actually, if you look at drownings on Lake Michigan, counting all the states, the number could be anywhere from 120 to 135 drownings.
And we're 57 of them?
Yes.
Is that because we're in an urban area? What is that?
No, I think, first of all, I think Lake Michigan itself is known for its rip currents. And I think that we just have to create greater awareness so that people can enjoy Lake Michigan. And so, we do have the national park here, which attracts about 4 million visitors a year.
Right.
40% of those visitors are residents of the state of Indiana, and the other 60% are coming from someplace else or visiting. So really, I think is a combination of being aware of the actual conditions of the water, so that you know how to protect your family and friends, or when is a good time to go in, when's not a good time to go into the water. And it's also not having life rescue equipment or floating devices on the beaches available for people to use. We've had drowning. People would assume that most drownings are like young people or young, teenagers that are overextending themselves. But if you look at the list of names with the locations and the ages of the people that are drowning, it's a whole range of ages. You're talking about young people in their 20s, people in their 40s, 50s, men and women and children. So we need to be aware that this is not just an assumption that it's only happening to young people.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So what are we doing? Tell me what you're doing.
Because you're supporting you by letting me be here today to talk about it.
I'm supporting you, yes.
So as I told you earlier, myself, I was rescued that day by a bystander in 2012. It was a young man that was walking on the beach. He was 22 years old, and he told his mother, I think those people are struggling.
In trouble, right?
Yeah, he thought we were in trouble. And so, I was very lucky that day he himself didn't lose his life, right? Because he jumped in to help innocently. And he was able to reach me. Unfortunately, my boyfriend, Leonel Dominguez, who was 32 years old, who was a couple of months away from finishing his nursing degree, and who was actually a very good swimmer, was not able to survive. And so a lot of people don't know 66% of drowning victims are very good swimmers. So I share that because when you get caught in a rip current, the strength of the water is so much that in order to survive, what you have to do is flip on your back, float, and follow. Of course, I didn't know that day, and the young man that jumped in the water was able to rescue me. But since then, I've become a water safety advocate. And so in the early parts of 2012, I got together with families of drowning victims, and we were able to work closely in the state of Illinois. And 2 years ago in the state of Illinois, they passed the Lake Michigan Rescue Equipment Act. And so in Illinois, when you visit, you will see that in all of the beaches and all the piers, there's life rescue equipment. It's a life ring inside a weatherproof case with a 100-foot rope. And it's on a stand, and it sits close to the beach access and the beach shore. And so
you should be able to get one of those things to somebody who's reasonably close.
Absolutely. And so, there's a lot of debate in different town councils about, well, should we have life jackets? Should we have noodles? Should we have lifeguards? But the reality is lifeguards would be the most ideal. But with all of the budgets and training required, it becomes difficult. At a minimum, with life rescue rings, you would have a flotating device which would allow people to float until rescue people get there. Or if you're a bystander and you're going to jump into the water, that you can take that tie the rope around your waist, swim towards the person, and possibly pull that life ring in between both of you, because oftentimes the person that's drowning
is really frantic.
Is frantic and can drown the person that's rescuing them,
right?
So the concept here is to make sure we have that life rescue ring available. So since then, we then have last year did a lot of work in uniting families and communities of drowning victims here in the area of Indiana. And we were able to submit a bill last year. It was Senate Bill 424. And that bill got through the Senate Natural Resource Committee with a unanimous support from Republicans and Democrats. It went to the Senate floor. It also received unanimous voting and approval to move forward. Unfortunately, it got to the chair of the Natural Resource Committee for the House. It is House Representative Shane Lindauer. And he felt that the bill did not need to be heard. So he
felt what?
The bill did not need to be heard, and so he cut the bill, and the bill died.
Why didn't it need to be heard?
When we talked to him, he said that he felt that this topic about life rescue rings should be handled by the local communities along the water, and not that it was not a full state issue. that
But
needed
these
to be
aren't
legislated.
people who are necessarily in those communities, by and large.
Yeah, it's people from all over the state, right?
All over the country.
And we also invite people to come here and enjoy our shores and enjoy our beaches. And
we advertise it.
Yes. And so we are now I've called Senator Lindauer's office. I spoke to them yesterday again. I've sent them a docket of information quoted by experts and water safety experts, to with all the background of why this bill is needed. And so we've asked to meet with them. And so they said I'll hear by Monday of next week if they're going to meet with me, if they're going to put the bill on the agenda. But I made myself available, and our members of our group is about 7 on the core team, and then it's a very large extended team of community support. We offered to drive out to Indianapolis and meet with him personally and answer any questions he may have. We are hopeful. Until they add it on the agenda, we're not sure yet this year. So we're really pushing for that. But we're prepared that if the bill gets put on the agenda to be heard at the House of Representatives Natural Resource Committee, we'll drive up and testify. And so I'll testify about my story and what happened that day. And we'll also have one of my colleagues that is very good friends with Thomas Kenning, who passed away 2 years ago. Thomas Kenning was visiting, with his parents that live here in, I believe, in Chesterton. They live, and so he grew up in this area. He was 38 years old. He was a teacher. He was also an author. And he actually proposed to his wife here at the dunes at Mount Baldy. And so that day he was having like a picnic with his parents and his daughter, and there was an announcement out for rip currents, but some people aren't really listening. And so while he was there, a young girl, between 13 and 14 years old, was struggling in the water. And he jumped in to rescue her, even though he knew he was not a good swimmer. And there were no flotating devices. And unfortunately, he lost his life that day, and he's a hero. And that little girl was saved. But that was a very big loss for his family who was there that day at the beach to hear about his loss. So for people like Thomas, for people like my boyfriend, Leonel, and others, so Lynn James, he'll go testify as well. And we also have parents of other children that have, and adults that have drowned. Greg Froese testified at the Senate hearing 2 weeks ago, and he spoke about his daughter, Chase. She was 20 years old. She was on her way to college with a couple of her girlfriends, and they stopped and decided to just get a swim in the water, to cool off. And unfortunately, she got caught in a rip current. Her friends were able to be rescued by bystanders that happened to be on a kayak, a floating device, that were able to rescue the other friends. But unfortunately, she was 20 years old, and she lost her life that day. And so, this can happen to anyone. And unfortunately, you never want this to happen to anyone.
No.
But,
and it's so easy to prevent if you have the equipment just on the beach.
Correct.
And people, oh my goodness.
And it's low cost, right? So in order to cover the 26 mile of beaches, not counting the area where you have the factories and the mills, but if you think about just public beach access, we've calculated based on the recommendations made on the bill, it'd be approximately 100 life rings. Each life ring is about $525. The max could be $1,000. So let's say it's going to be between $65,000 or $100,000 total installed. So this is not a cost issue. The other thing is, helping everybody understand why, because drowning happens so quickly, and drowning is also very silent. So if you submerged underwater, if you're fighting to survive, after a couple of minutes you're exhausted, and when you submerge, after 3 minutes, you're losing consciousness. At, anywhere between 6 and 7 minutes, you can have brain damage. And at 10 minutes of submersion, you're dead. It's very fast. And so think about our beaches. We don't have that much cell coverage. If someone is struggling, people have to run to the road, run back out to call for help. Fire rescue teams, police, when they arrive, even if they come at their fastest, they're going to be there between 10 and 15 minutes. That's assuming they know how to find you.
Yes.
Because if we have the life rescue rings and we can number them, or you could say you're at station post 34 or your closest station post 25. Yeah, so, even we've had situations. So having a flotation device is the fastest way to prevent someone from drowning and wait till the fire rescue and people arrive. We're not saying that regular people going to the beach should become lifeguards.
No.
But we're saying, should anyone think about jumping in, make sure to grab the life ring.
Right.
And so we've also had situations where...
And their life ring should be right there.
Yes, it needs to be immediate, easy to access. And by having it at all the public beach access areas, you raise awareness.
Right.
There's a lot of discussion. We're currently meeting with the National Park Service. We met with their leadership in July of last year. We're meeting with them again next week to continue to ask them to put life rings on the national park beaches. They are very interested in doing the right thing, and the conversations are moving forward. So we'll see what happens next week, but they understand the importance of this. And
right.
We understand we're not going to be able to prevent all lives.
Well, they don't want the national park to have that on their record anyway.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
just even from PR point of view.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk a lot about that,
right.
Because I'm trying to approach this from a common sense bill, and I'm trying to approach it from when you've seen a drowning and you've experienced it. And unfortunately, all those people that work for the national park, for the police department, for the fire department, it is traumatic when you have to be part of a life rescue
that fails.
And so we also know that, you might have heard last summer, it's just very unfortunate and very traumatic. A grandfather took his 7-year-old grandchild to Ogden Dunes to the beach, and the waters were choppy and it happened very quickly. Unfortunately, the little boy lost his life. And you could just imagine the trauma to not only those grandparents, but to the parents and to the community and to all the people that had to witness that, along with the life that was lost that day. But there was a police officer that showed up, that was the first responder to the scene. And that police officer, my understanding, is an experienced open water swimmer and competed in college in open water swimming and jumped in to try to do the rescue. And unfortunately, they weren't able to get in time to the boy, but that police officer was fearing for their life. They told us they were fearing for their life because they did not have a flotation device themselves. And so as they were getting beat up by the waves, they were also getting exhausted.
Yeah.
And so thank God she was okay. But, we say that this flotation device is needed for the people that are on the water, for the bystanders that might decide to jump in and rescue,
And even for skilled personnel.
And skilled personnel, because it takes time for the first respond teams to arrive, and the ones that respond are just kind of trying to understand what the situation is. And so, we're really, praying and hoping that this bill goes forward because it's the right thing to do. And so, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to raise awareness, and to, if anyone has any questions, to reach out to you on the podcast and let me know, put them in contact with me.
You can put your contact information right there.
Yeah. So, my email, I'll put it on the documents.
We'll
probably easier to spell out and everything, right? But more than glad to have people reach out. And, I was hoping to give you a list of the 6 or 7 committee members that are currently in the House Natural Resource Committee. We need people to call and to send an email. And so I have their names, their phone number, their assistant's phone number, and their email.
Great.
So make it easy for people to just communicate your support for this bill. you know, and the importance of preserving life. You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, when we talk to legislators, you know, well, I'm sorry you lost someone, but we can't change everything just every time you lose someone. But this isn't about just the loved one that I've lost.
Right.
This is about helping. This is something that continues to happen every summer.
To stop it.
And we need to give a language so that all the communities along the lakefront can have the same standard, the minimum standard of water safety, and can also track drownings. Right now,
right.
The only people tracking it is the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. There's no government body or town body or anybody tracking the number of drownings. It just kind of goes by the wayside, right? And so the bill calls for life rescue rings and for there to be a tracking. And if more than one person drowns in a 5-year period in that beach or in that location, then that town or that would have to do more water safety education. So that means better signage, right? If it's a really high-risk location, then, you know, but they can decide. The bill doesn't say what they should put. It just says you need to do more, versus kind of spelling out what they should do. But we think this is going to be good for our community.
I think it's going to be great.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
And trying everything. And like I said, we're, you know, also if anyone knows someone that's been affected by drowning on the Great Lakes and wants to join our efforts, or if you know someone that works in water safety, that leads a water safety program, a water education, please put them in contact with me as well. You know, the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, they do water safety and rescue trainings for fire departments, police departments. Mm-hmm. They do trainings at schools, at high schools, elementary schools, because we need to teach children about flip, float, and follow.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to give you a link to the work that describes flip, float, and follow so that we can make sure that it becomes something as common as...
Flip, float, and follow means hitting your back.
Flipping on your back, right?
Floating.
Yes.
Not being afraid, just floating and letting the current take you where it goes.
And then determine a path in.
Right.
So what happens is when you get caught in a rip current, you start fighting the rip current. You start trying to swim, and I know because I lived through it. And when you try to swim, even if you're swimming, you're not going anywhere because it's a strong current that feels like you're on a treadmill, but you're in the water. And then there are, like in my case that day, there were five-foot waves. So as you're trying to swim, the wave is hitting you on the face, and as you're trying to get air, you're getting water in your mouth. And so as you're doing that, you get exhausted, and you go into panic. Your heart starts beating, and you're thinking about multiple things in your head at that moment as you see possibility death in front of you. In our situation, our accident happened June 12th. It was like a 90-degree hot day, but unfortunately, in Lake Michigan, because it is so deep, there can be ice waters underneath all the way up until August.
Right.
And so with the rip current, it brought water from the bottom up. And so it was very cold. And when we found ourselves in that situation, you can actually pass out and not be able to breathe because of the cold of the water. And so you're in that cold water, you're trying to swim, you're out of breath, you're getting exhausted. What it calls for is for you to flip on your back because you can calm down and you preserve energy, and you can also breathe easier.
And you're closer to the surface, so it might be warmer.
Warmer, and you can also preserve energy and stay there much longer, right? You could wave even, right? Because when you're trying to swim and fight for your life and breathe, you cannot. That's like the movies. You cannot go, help! That's the movies. In real life, swimming is very silent. And by the time the person screams, they're about 45 seconds to a minute to submerge. And so you flip on your back to conserve energy, be able to breathe, stay calm, and then it's going to pull you. And even if it's pulling you into the lake, it's going to let you go. And then you curve around and come back out. So that's why you want to follow the current, but then make your way out. And so it's important that we teach this to children, even if they know how to swim, and to teenagers or anyone in any body of water, whether it's a pool. Oftentimes there's pools and kids fall into pools. And so I think it's a definitely important survival technique.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I am so glad you have taken this on. I don't know anybody better to lead this effort. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Creating from the heart, the artistry of living. And if you know someone with a story who should have it heard, please let me know. Suzy Vance. See you next time.